Welcome back to the program. Thanks for staying with us. Remember, you can contact us, fire your questions, make your comments. 22422 is the SMS line, and the hashtag is Newsnight. The big topic is the state of the economy. Kenya KWANZA administration, about 28 days in office. Lots of far-reaching policy directives made by President William RUTO. But of course, the question that keeps coming up is how soon before that economic pressure begins to ease off on Kenyans? And that's what we want to get into at this time. Let me introduce my guest once again. In studio, I have Dr. Stephen Gashie. He's an economic analyst privy to the Kenya KWANZA plan. He'll be sharing some insights with us. We have Dr. Mary Mbithi, who is a senior lecturer, Department of Economics at the University of Nairobi. And joining us from Riyadh in Saudi Arabia is Mohamed Welie, central banker. To each of you, welcome to the program. Let me immediately pose that first question to Mohamed Welie and get a sense from him on how soon he reckons with what he's seeing so far. The economic pressure may begin to ease off. Welie, I trust you can hear me. You can dive in with that question. Mohamed, can you hear me? Oh, we seem to have a connection challenge. We actually were just talking.
Sorry.
Oh, there you go.
I can hear you. I can hear you now. Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yes. How soon before economic pressure begins to ease off for Kenyans? I think that's the question many are asking this evening.
I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. I think the new administration has to fix a lot of things before we can get any relief. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon, to be honest with you. They have inherited a big mess. I do agree when they say that. But that's what they knew anyway when they were coming into office. So Kenyans are looking for solutions, and for those of us who understand, who also know the true picture, we know that it's not going to happen overnight.
In summary, what's the true picture of the economy tonight? Of course, we've heard what Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua has had to say, but from an as an economist, what would you say, in summary, the true picture of the economy is today?
Well, the true picture of the economy is we have a big problem when it comes to debt. The fiscal side is in a mess. We are not able to do anything other than to pay our debts and maybe salary. We have big 5 items. And I think we've been borrowing to finance some of those, items. And I think the situation remains as it was. The previous administration has been trying to firefight over the last 2 years. It's not that these problems, of course, every day as every day passes by, things are getting worse in terms of the debt situation, because we have a problem with the exchange rate. We have a problem with interest rates basically going up. The cost of debt is going up. So we are in a debt trap. And unless they come up with a solution for that debt trap, there is no fiscal space. They cannot do anything that they have promised to do. And if they're lucky, they will only be able to, pay their bills. And this is something that I think they are aware. And from the looks of how they've started, I think they do appreciate the kind of position we are in.
Okay, and I'll come back with a few more questions. But Dr. Mbithi, I don't know if you hold the same view. The clock is ticking. Cost of living, inflation now at 9.2% in September. What miracles can happen to bring that down so that there can be some relief, maybe on the food, maybe on fuel prices? What are your thoughts?
Yes, I really hold the same view that the economy, we are not likely to see a change in a very short period of time, because also the other factors that are causing the challenges that we see in the economy are beyond the economy, are beyond Kenya. They are external factors. So we do have domestic factors that are contributing to the high cost of living. We have, for example, issues also related to unemployment. We have drought that has beset many parts of the country, which means even domestic production of food, which is a basic need, has been challenged in the recent past. That means the cost of food has been going up. This combined with the fact that Kenya is also importing a lot of food and other products from outside the country. And we also know that there are international factors that are leading to high cost of goods, and as well as combined with the high devaluation of Kenyan shilling. So all that means that the cost of living is going up, the cost of imports is higher, and therefore everybody feels it, including even the cost of fuel, which we know has been going up. And we know that fuel, touches in all the sectors of the economy, be it food production, be it transportation, be it areas of production where we are using fuel and so on. So all those factors really, some of them are beyond Kenya. So even if the current government is to try to address those issues, then it may take some time before we see a real change.
Dr. Gashie, we had some very big promises by both sides of the political, actually by all candidates that were on the campaign trail before the elections, and yet the economists were telling us it doesn't matter what you promise, it doesn't matter who takes over, they are going to find themselves in big trouble. And one question is, why do politicians make so many promises on the campaign trail, and then it's a different situation, whoever wins, when they take over?
Well, I think all the time campaigning are always very optimistic. However, if you look at Kenya KWANZA, their manifesto is called the plan. And I think if you look at the preamble, they are taking cognizance of where the country is economic-wise. And they give promises, which some of them are short-term, medium-term, and long-term. For example, I think there has been that attempt to address the cost of living through giving out fertilizers, hoping that we'll have good lanes, short lanes, so that we can produce. And I think that is why quickly they removed the subsidy, because sometimes you say you don't tinker the economy at retail. Because what was subsidy were doing, of the money that we are giving at the consumption level, a lot of it was going to the countries where we are importing maize. So we are growing the agriculture there. So I think the idea, one of them, is to look at the agriculture, see how quickly we can turn out productivity. There is a question of debts. Our budget, our economy is debt-driven. And what the president has done quickly is to look at the budget and say, can we maybe knock off 300 billion from what we don't have? Because already we plan...
knock off 300 billion from what we don't have.
We don't have.
It's an oxymoron. There's something interesting in there.
We don't have. So we are knocking off from what we don't have, because we are saying we needed to borrow 900 billion. So the president said, could we do away with 300 billion? Look at areas that are not priority. Could we be more frugal, prudent on our finances, so that maybe in 3 years' time, we can get out from our budget deficit. And what it means then, if, for example, of the 300 billion that we're going to knock off, is money maybe you would have borrowed from domestic. And when you borrow from domestic borrowing, when the government come in, you crowd off the businesses. So banks and finance institutions say, I would rather give to the government because I'm sure the cost of learning after you to pay is minimal. So probably what we'll do, we might have an effect that maybe we might get more banks giving money to the businesses. So I think that is where we are, short-term, medium-term, and also the question of the pending bills.
The pending bills, and we'll come to that in just a bit. Mohamed Walia, you had the opportunity to meet with President William Ruto. I think he was headed back to Kenya from the UN General Assembly. You were in Dubai, and somehow a meeting happened with others. Did the economy at any point come up in your discussions?
Look, I don't want to discuss what I discussed with the president, but yes, of course, the president looked like a person who was very concerned about the economy, and that's a good thing. I mean, we had a previous regime. I mean, you know, Waigwa, that some of us have been making a lot of noises over the last 10 years about this same problem, the fact that we can foresee a lot of problems coming. And the previous regime was very relaxed about it. You remember the talk of, you know, Japan has a, you know, debt GDP ratio of 200, in the United States. We will borrow as much as we can as long as we invest in infrastructure. The attitude was very different. What I've seen from William Ruto's government, you know, the few days or at least a month that they've been in office, they are concerned. You know, our concern about the previous regime was that they were not concerned at all. So I don't know whether their concern now will translate into action. The president has basically said he expects or he wants 300 billion to be cut from the current budget, and that's the way to go. There was no any other option, because it was not only about cutting spending, it was also about funding the budget. I mean, if you look at the markets, the market is taking up anything less than 1 year treasury bills, but the bond, you know, the subscription rate was very, very poor over the last few months, and we are already into the third month. The government is already behind in terms of funding the domestic budget, and the banks know that the government needs a lot of money. I think it was about 580 billion from the domestic markets. So once the banks know this, and they know you are behind, and soon you will have to, you know, borrow more per month than you would have borrowed over the spread of the 1 year. Then what happens is that you have to pay a premium. You have to pay because you're desperate. And now, by the president cutting 300 billion, and I think what they need to do, because the president just said that they need to cut spending. He didn't say where that spending cut will come from. I would expect the CS Treasury to come out clearly and say that they're going to cut this from the domestic borrowing. That will then help in terms of you know, getting the banks to come to borrow, and at a reasonable rate than they would have borrowed. The government would have borrowed if the budget was not cut. So it was the only option they had. There's of course the challenge of also the how to finance the 280 billion they were going to borrow from the, you know, foreign markets or foreign sources. Now it will be easier for them if they can go for, I mean, if they can go to our international partners and basically say, look, we are very serious about fiscal consolidation. We've cut 300 billion shillings from our domestic budget. Can you help us by offsetting that and giving us $3 billion? That will be good for the reserves. That will also then be able to help them in financing their budget. I think they have to do a lot of firefighting, a lot of fixing some of the problems before they can even do anything. So the next 6 months for this government is going to be very, very critical. What they do is going to be very important and will determine anything else, whether we fall off the cliff or whether we survive and continue to have the confidence of both the domestic and international markets.
Mohammed, now bringing in the concept of falling off the cliff, very scary, I'm sure, for some watching. Dr. Mbithi, I don't know whether you have a contrary view, because there are those who've been concerned that when you talk about cutting the budget by 300 billion, there are possible implications. One, previous governments have talked about austerity measures. For some reason, they've not been able to live up to it. Secondly, some are concerned that you could affect public sector workers' salaries or allowances, which would have other implications as well. Do you see, how can that be navigated where, you save that 300 billion, which we don't have either way, without affecting some of the concerns that have been raised by Kenyans?
Yes, I think austerity measures are some of the best measures governments have been using to, to reduce the budget deficit, because the alternative of that is raising taxes. Now, if you raise taxes, the impact is likely to be, the negative impact is likely to be bigger for the economy. And actually, it has been shown by several economists that austerity measures have less negative impacts on the economy as compared to raising taxes. Now, the reduction of budget, as has been put, what it does is it will reduce that deficit which the government would have borrowed from another place. And that means then we have the debt ratio to the GDP reduces. Currently is over 68%. So if we have reduction in budget, then we are likely to reduce the debt ratio to the country. Now, one way the government can do this is to look at those sectors that probably will not have big impact on the economy. The expenditures that do not have, may not have big impacts in the economy. For example, we are talking about some of the recurrent expenditures, including the expenditures in the offices or others that the government can be able to reduce. And those can be, government can decide, is it, for example, including foreign trips, which are important, but also which could be reduced, and that will mean, less cost and therefore less saving to attain that particular budget cut. Another thing which is important is the budget cut or expenditure cutting is not enough in itself. Also, the government will need to implement other accompanying measures to ensure that, for example, sectors that have a multiplier impact in the economy, there is growth. For example, government can promote growth in the agricultural sector. Of course, we are seeing some of the measures which are being implemented. For example, the subsidization of fertilizers, that's a good measure, which would accompany austerity measures, because agricultural sector employs a great number of people in Kenya. So if government, again, implements measures to support investment in agriculture sectors and other sectors which employ majority of people, that would be a good measure. Austerity measures, on the other hand, cutting of government spending could also have a negative impact, and especially if the cutting of expenditure is to the key sectors of the economy that support growth, such sectors such as infrastructure and so on, health sector, education. That would not be good for the economy, because if such sectors' budget is reduced, then it means we cannot be able to achieve some of the key elements of development that are important and which have a multiplier impact in the economy.
Okay, very interesting analysis there. And I'll be reading some of your feedback shortly. I know I'm seeing a lot of messages. And for you, Dr. Gashie, just to take the conversation forward, but you can comment on this topic as well, even as we continue. One of the moves we saw that caused, that really hit the headlines was a cut to Fuliza charges. And there was a big discussion around that, slashing interest rates on Fuliza loans below 1,000 bob by 40%, and introducing, I think it was a 3-day grace period for borrowers. So how will this work? Because we then saw after that CBK signaling higher interest rates by lifting the benchmark interest rate, I think, the very next day. The question of cheap credit to spur the economy into business, was this the way to go?
Well, that could be one step. Data shows that 90% of those people who are in Fuliza are those who have a credit or loans of less than 3,000.
How many? 90%?
90%.
Okay.
3,000. Meaning, most of those people who are in CRB are those people who are in 1,000 to 3,000. So meaning, if you cut 50% of that, very significant for that group of people. So where to go? Then I think I want to go to where Dr. spoke about the ripple effect within the sector. And I think that is where the bottom-up is building an economic model. And sometimes we try to explain the model without putting in what we call the theory of change. Theory of change is how do we need to change that? Because we look at it as ecosystem. And we normally say almost 80% of Kenyans are in formal sector. A huge part of it are in what we call micro and small enterprises who are not able to access credit. Those are people who run around the city because they're not sure whether they put stock for 1,000, whether they will see the evening because of harassment. So the idea is that if we can tinker that at the bottom, and we have people who are active, and they have their businesses growing, we go to agriculture. What will happen now then is that other key sectors of economy will grow, okay? We'll have productivity, we'll have more people paying less to the county government, paying to the taxes. We'll have an army of the middle class. And when you have an army of middle class, it's a consumption. There are people who are going to pay more of taxes. If you look at 2003, that is a model probably in a different way the government of Moi Kibaki did, that all of a sudden we could have what we now call real GDP growth. And real GDP growth is when the GDP is growing maybe 7%, and also Maura's finances are also growing. However, the discussion was there is that we are saying the GDP is growing, and people will say, how come I don't feel it? So until as when we get there, and I think that was the basis of the model, so that we get everyone on board to be productive in the labor, in the whether business, whether in agriculture, so that we'll be able to grow our economy. We'll have more taxes. From now, ordinary revenue is about 2 trillion. If we push it to 2.6, then our deficit, if our budget is about 3.3 trillion, is about 600. Meaning, if you are to borrow, how much are we borrowing? So I think it's that combination. And Dr. talked about, I think also you talked about debt to GDP ratio. And sometimes you don't compare oranges with oranges. There's no way you're going to compare the GDP for Japan, USA, when you know maybe one county in USA could be the size of our economy. So there's no way you say that USA, their debt ratio to the GDP is 100%, and ours is 10%. We cannot survive because I remember the governor of Central Bank said that I think we are paying almost 40 cents for every shilling to service debt, some of which is recurrent expenditure. So a lot of that need to change so that we move from, my friend Waria is talking about the Timmy point. And I hope he's going to pay, he still owe my bet for something that empirically predicted.
There's something you predicted that Walia got wrong?
Yes, and he still owe a bet, you remember?
Okay. Let me read feedback, then I'll ask Walia what that bet was. What was the issue? Let me read SMSs as we put up the tweets. Somebody says here, for the present government to achieve the cut in spending, firstly, the Hustlers Fund should be merged with the existing youth and women funds, so that the funds can be one. If it's allowed to operate like that, then it's a way of creating room for corruption. This is Maurice Okiwi from Huruma, Mathare constituency. Someone here is saying, what's the difference between political promises and real development continuing after transition? What are the financial impact of some of these directives on small enterprises? Okay, we have some tweets. I don't know if we're able to put them up. We hope to be able to have that shortly on the program. Somebody says, let them reduce our spending to breathe life into the economy. And I'll read a few more even as it. We have the tweets. Not yet. Okay. Okay. Oh, there we go. All right. This first one coming in from, let's see who we have. Okay, Engineer Lazaro Kanyambok, you say, we are no longer in campaign mode. Let's tell Kenyans the truth. The ongoing economic crisis will continue for unknown periods. Kenyans, tighten your belts. Stop believing in every sweet PR from politicians. That's Engineer Lazaro. Danson Kuruna, you say, if His Excellency William Ruto wants to succeed, he should restore the economic planning function, which had served the country well over the years. He should begin by turning his manifesto into an economic recovery and debt stabilization strategy. Okay, very interesting. Let me see. Abe Lincoln? Okay, that name sounds very familiar. You say there's no single panacea to the economic challenges we face in Kenya today. The situation requires diverse interventions. Will certainly take time for the effects of these interventions to be seen. The Kenya KWANZA government has shown intent to work. We should be patient. Okay, Abe. Godfrey Barasa, you say, I find the opposition being unfair and opportunistically dishonest about our economic state. How best would they have handled the economic state of the country? It's time they rallied behind the thought of stabilizing our economy. Do we have another one? Okay, Senior Drawaru, I hope I've said it right. Kenya, and indeed the rest of Africa, should look for the long-term solutions. Raising production, moving away from import dependence should go a long way. Zambia has proven over the last year that it can be done. Do you have any others? Ole Kim says, our fiscal space is strained. The economy is on its knees, but we trust the plan. The president should now declare the biting drought a national disaster. The situation seems to worsen before it gets better. Mohamed Welie, I don't know if you got a chance to hear some of those sentiments from viewers tonight. Some are saying, look at what Zambia did. Can we do the same? And I don't know if you're familiar with the Zambia case study over the last 1 year. And others are saying, let's speak the truth. The promises are over. The reality is very different. What are your thoughts, Mohamed? But first, what was that bet also?
I think Daktari has to remind me, we've gone through a 1 year of a lot of noise, so I can't remember, to be honest. But just to answer some of those questions, I think we cannot do what Zambia did. Zambia defaulted. So I don't think we can even think about default. It's something that we have to stop at any cost. And I think whatever the previous regime did, one thing they were very, very strong on is that, the previous president saying that I don't care who gets what and who doesn't get what. I don't want this country to default. So, that's a badge of honor that we have. That's our sovereign, rating. It's an honor for our country. So, you could see sometimes counties not being paid on time, delays, pending bills, 500 or so billion. All that is because somebody was trying to avoid default. And I think this government also, this administration has to do the same. We have to make sure that we don't go the Zambian way. I also agree with the person who said that we need to make sure that we put in place the NESC, the National Economic and Social Council. Mm-hmm. I don't know why the previous, the Kibaki administration used it well. It's a forum where the president can listen to people from outside of the technocrats that work for him. If you tell the technocrat that works for you, I want 50 billion tomorrow, they will always say, yes, sir. So you need to get a view outside of the people who work for you, so that then you understand what's going outside, or what during the campaigns, the RUTO side were calling mambo kwa ground, iko namna gani. So I think good points were raised. In terms of short-term, medium-term, and long-term, what is supposed to be done, they say in the long run, we are all dead. But in this case, I would say even in the medium term, we are dead, because we don't have that luxury. We're talking about what we are going to do in the next 6 months, 8 months. It's, we're talking about, production, investing in, doing subsidies that are geared towards production. All those things are anything that is 7 months, 8 months, 9 months from today. I think it's good to plan for those kind of things, but at the same time, I think we have immediate fires to fight. What are we going to do about this debt? How are we going to structure the debt if we have to restructure? How are we going to fund our budget, domestic and also foreign? How are we going to deal with the currency problem that we face? We have a currency crisis also at the same time. There's shortage of dollars. Importers are crying. So we need to deal with the immediate issues. And those issues are issues that will keep the RUTO administration away from their promises, but are important, because if they don't do, then anything else that they plan to do will never happen. So I think it's all about the short term now. Short term, short term, short term. That's my view.
Dr. Mbithi, do you agree? Because there are those who are saying we've tried too many short-term solutions in the past. It's time now for someone to have a long-term plan.
Yes, I do agree. Because in the long run is when we are likely to find full impact of the economy with regards to all the sectors and adjusting and full employment and actually, you know, factors in the economy changing. But having said that, let me talk about one of the comments that has come, the matching of funds to form the ASRA fund. I think that suggestion sounds very good, the matching of funds, because we have several funds that are existing, and all of them are targeting the youth, the women, and the micro and small business enterprises, and also with some special, you know, provisions for persons with disabilities. And I think it is good if these funds were to be matched into one. Probably that could present a better administration and could have a bigger impact on the target population. Sometime there was a discussion of matching funds that were existing. It was a discussion of funding, I think, Women Enterprise Fund, UWESO Fund, a Youth Enterprise Fund, and so on, into Biashara funds. The discussion ended up somewhere. But I think if these funds are, you know, put together to target micro, small, and medium enterprises, that could be a good idea.
Okay, and those are some of the thoughts you have. Dr. Gashi, I don't know whether you now want to tell us what the bet was with Welie, even as you, as you respond to what he's saying. He's saying it's good for plans that will, you know, materialize or, you know, sort of yield fruit in the next 9 months. But there's a Kenyan watching the show today thinking, I don't have 9 months. I need that relief today. Is there anything that Kenya Kwanza has done over the last 1 month that offers that, or that is geared towards offering that immediate relief, and Welie feels not yet?
Okay, before I come to that, maybe I would like to comment what Dr. has talked about, the margin of funds. For me, I would not support that.
You would not support the merging of
yeah,
funds?
Because we need to ask ourselves, we have had youth funds, we have had UWESO. Why did it make it so hard for it to work? Why don't we have so many successful stories for people who have come through it? Because there was a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of inefficiencies. I think is how it was operationalized. And I keep saying, whatever, that there is what we call Lwathia model of business. A Lwathia model is those then young men and
from Muranga.
From Muranga, who came together and built the business empire because they shared a dream. Today, a lot of young people will come together to open a car wash while waiting for an opportunity. Okay? So when they get the funding, sometimes they'll be asked for security. When the funding comes through and one of them gets an opportunity better than that, they will go. So do your monitoring and evaluating, see how many of those businesses are still successful. The difference between Hustler Fund is that it's targeting for people who even have an idea where can be incubated a startup. That it is not so rigorous how much of security that you have, that your idea itself is a security. I think that is the might shift that we need to have when you look how do we finance these businesses. So for me, I will not go for merging of the funds. I'll let the Biashara, the Hustler Fund go it by itself because the model is a bit different. I would agree with my brother that, and I said it before, there is a short term, there is a medium term and long term. For me, and I said this when I had a show here again, I think with Francis Gashuri, that for me, I think the economy will come, I'm looking at 2025.
2025?
When we'll have a little GDP growth, little one, whether we have jobs, opportunities are there, people have money in their pocket. However, before then, we'll have medium term. Short term, we've talked about the fertilizer because we want to quickly turn around the production. We're looking at what you call about Furiza to get people can be able to look for more money and continue to do business. Maybe quickly when we have legislation in the parliament and when we look at the finance bill, maybe 2022, and we talk about the Hustler Fund, probably quickly it's how we operationalize, or the government operationalize the Hustler Fund so that quickly people can have money to trade. Those would be short term. Of course, I think looking at the global perspective, we might have a relief on oil. I think global oil prices have gone by 10%. Probably on Friday, we might have a relief at the pump.
That's a prayer.
I can predict that.
Today, I'm sure.
No, if the computation is based on the forex exchange, the exchange rate, and the price of oil out there, I think there has been 10%. Probably that might have a quick, maybe a relief at the pump. However, long term, I'll agree, 9 months, that's the time we'll start getting out ourselves from the hole.
Okay, 9 months, my goodness. Mohamed Welie, let's brief, even as we, I'll take a bit more feedback as we come to the tail end of the interview. The decision to move and to ensure that the SGR's operations, some of the functions, the port operations are transferred to Nairobi and from the Nairobi and Naivasha Inland Container Depot to Mombasa. There are those who say that that was a mistake, that you starved the SGR of freight revenues by returning the port operations to Mombasa, when the SGR itself carries a heavy debt burden on the taxpayer. Do two wrongs make a right? What are your thoughts on that directive that was announced on Inauguration Day and has been followed up on?
Waigo, I think it doesn't matter where you move the SGR business to, whether you move it to Kenya Railways or back to Kenya Ports Authority. It's irrelevant. If you buy something that is worth $1 billion for $5 billion, it will never make economic sense. It doesn't matter what you do. So at the end of the day, it's just, moving the business from one parastatal to the other. It's all the same government. The problem we have with the solution for the SGR has to be political. It cannot be economic. There is no economic solution to the SGR. You can do whatever you want to do. You will never get a return on investment or anything, good out of the railway, because simply it's overpriced. It was supposed to cost maybe $1.5 billion. It cost, I don't know, $4 billion or even more. Now, you can take it anywhere you want. You're not going to make an economic sense out of it. The best solution is a political solution, I think, and my personal view is that the president and his team go to China, sit down with the Chinese and say, guys, this was a mistake. You were part of the mistake. You accepted those terms. You knew it was not going to work. Let's negotiate. Maybe convert it to PPP and take it off the government's books. That way you can get fiscal space. And let me tell you the truth. Dr. can also maybe jump in later. You will not get the fiscal space you need to talk. You need to fund all these funds you're talking about. You're talking about the Hustler Fund. You're talking about so many funds. You're talking about so many things that you promised. You are not going to get that fiscal space unless you deal with the railway issue. The railway is eating a lot of dollars from the government. And unless you solve that, from January next year, I think you'll be paying in January, you'll be paying about $800 million. Just imagine what that does to our reserves. The little foreign currency remittances and inflows we get, a lot of it is going to be consumed by a project like the railway. So you have to deal with the railway. And I think that has to be a priority for the current government. They have to go and do something about it. If you don't, it doesn't matter whether you take it to Kenya Railways or you can even take it if you want to, Kenya Pipeline or anywhere. You will just be beating about the bush.
Since you referenced Dr. Gashie, let me allow him to jump in on this. Dr. Gashie, I think there was a plan in the Kenya Kwanza manifesto on the SGR, but he says, listen, doesn't matter what you do.
I don't agree with him.
You don't agree with him?
No, he's a good brother of mine. I don't agree with him because what we need about SGR is economic solution. We cannot have a railway that comes from Nairobi or what we call hinterland. From hinterland to Mombasa, empty, because it cannot be sustained by passenger services. So we must have goods that we must export. And I think Kenya Kwanza plan, there's a plan around Naivasha, the industrial park, the leather industry. We need to look at our productivity agriculture. We need to export. And that's why I think it's the Deputy President who said that one of the key parameter of performance for our envoy is how much market they create for our goods. And our goods can only be carried from this side of the city or of the country through railway. So we must, we have no excuse. We must produce so that the railway becomes viable.
How long do you think that would take?
But sorry, Daktari, sorry to jump in, Daktari. How are you?
I'll come to you.
Sorry, Daktari, how are you going to force an ambassador who sits in Geneva? How is he going to force exports? I mean, there are international rules, there are trade rules. I heard what the Deputy President said, but all our ambassadors and embassies are already engaged in economic diplomacy. That's something I personally also do with the embassy. As a private citizen, I always go out as an ambassador for Kenya to do that. But you cannot tell an ambassador, I will give you KPIs, you are in Geneva or Berlin or somewhere, and if you don't meet these targets, you're coming back home. I think that was a bit crazy. And coming back to the railway, yes, I agree with you, but I mean, I said it does not, the immediate thing that you have to do has to be political, not economic solution. There is no economic, it doesn't matter what you export. It will never make sense, Daktari. And if you have to reach a level of exports to even break even, it's going to be so many years. And during those years, it's going to drain your reserves. So at the end of the day, you have to find a solution. Yes, it could have an economic solution, but not in the nature that it is now, because you have to take it probably off the government's books, talk to the Chinese, and they convert it to PPP, and maybe even sell it to, privatize it. If you can get good buyers, very rich people from outside the country, and they can maybe make sense out of it. But the government will never make sense out of it economically.
Let me get an immediate response. Let me go ahead, and then Dr. Mbithi, I'll need to hear from you as well.
Well, I think when I talked about our diplomatic mission, well, here you know there is what we call the commercial and business attaché, who are seated in all our missions. And that is their brief, that they need to be selling what we have in Kenya. Not physically looking for market, but also lobbying for that. And I don't know why he initially picked on Geneva, but we have Uganda here, who we trade most than any other. We have Tanzania. We are looking at the EAC. We are looking at the new African perspective. That I keep saying I visited Ghana sometime, and I bought tea from Egypt. And there is no one single tree in Egypt. What they do, they buy from Kenya, they pack, they sell to Ghana. So I was taking a product of Kenya via Egypt. So I think those are the discussions that we need to look at, so that how do we do with external markets? Are we silent? What is our commercial attachés doing there? They need to sell our products. They need to lobby for favorable terms of business, including barrier of trades, the tariff and tariffs. So that's what I was...
that's what you're alluding to.
Are
you concerned about the time frames? The Chinese are knocking on our doors as early as next year for those repayments, and yet some of the things you're talking about will take time to implement. How do you balance those? But
you see, what will happen is that we'll continue servicing the debts, and that is true, whether we are selling or not, and whether, even if we didn't have transition, we'll still be paying our obligations. But that's what we're calling the long term. That by the 5th year or the 4th year, we need to have moved from point A to B. And if we don't do that, then we'll have a problem paying the debts for the railway. And otherwise, and he said, we will not have a return of investment. And even we are struggling to have even a break even for the same. So we must, I keep saying we must be disruptive in our thinking and
Must
how
be disruptive.
on how we approach on business.
Okay, jump in, Doc. Is it economic? Is it political? What is it?
I think it's both. I tend to agree more with Dr. Waria, what he's saying. We need, first of all, to approach it from political point of view. The issue of trade is much more complicated because what we are doing with the railway is the goods, most of the goods, the trains is to bring the imports, but to take the exports is where the challenge is. So the issue of production comes in. But also to reach the market access becomes a big issue because there are issues of not only non-tariff barriers, but also tariff barriers, issues of trade facilitation, issues of standards, issues of SPSS, and especially with regards to our main exports, which are agricultural. Those ones may not be sorted out in a matter of months because they need an infrastructure, investment by the government of Kenya to ensure that the standards are met, to ensure that if it is fish or whatever products, and especially the ones that require strict international standards, we are able to meet them. So for me, it's both approaches. We need political in the short run because to increase production and to meet the needs of international trade is a challenge which countries, including Kenya and others, need to meet.
Okay. I mean, this is a fascinating discussion and very interesting, the tangent we are going, but our time, unfortunately, is running out. Let me get some final thoughts from each of my panelists on what they feel is or are low-hanging fruit that the government should immediately take advantage of, even as we try and get out of this interesting fiscal space that we find ourselves in. Mohamed Wali, let me start with you. Any low-hanging fruit that you think isn't being seen?
No, I think the government has to concentrate on fixing the macros. I think that's very important. Unless you deal with the issue of the fiscal deficit, the issue of currency, probably trying to help in dealing with inflation. They've already done the fertilizer. So those are probably the key things that they should focus on now. I don't think if you start looking for projects or, other type of low-hanging fruits, you're going to get off the track. And I think my worry is that, we have to survive at least the next 1 year by fixing what needs to be fixed immediately, and that's probably the macros.
Do you think the government should be having more discussions with all our lenders? Do you think that might be...
They have no choice. They have no choice. I mean, as I said, they should be in Washington already. There is the annual World Bank and IMF come together in Washington in October, and we are all headed there. We think that half the government should be there, and they should talk to the donors. There is no any other way out of this. And I think the low-hanging fruit they can look at now is to say the president has cut 300 billion spending. Those people love fiscal consolidation and fiscal discipline. And if that is, if that's followed to the letter, not just saying it, but it's done, then you can tell them, I cut 300 billion Kenya shillings. I cannot fund from the market because what happened about 8 months or so when they tried to go into the market, the international markets, it wasn't pretty. So they had to run away. So now the only way to get to fund the 280 billion, foreign part of the budget, foreign currency part of the budget, is to go and tell these guys, give me an equivalent of the amount I cut from my domestic budget. Then that gives you immediate relief in your reserves, and you're also able to do, you're also able to fund your budget, the FX part of it.
Okay, Dr. Mbithi, any long-hanging fruit as your final word?
Yes, for me, the expenditure cutting is point number one, because that way, at least the government will be able to reduce the issue of the budget deficit. The next thing is government to find ways of supporting micro, small, and medium enterprises, because again, we know a big number of people are involved in that kind of business, and that makes a lot of difference when it comes to the levels of income, to the people that are earning the very low levels of income, and that touches on many families, many households, and therefore it can contribute to business. This includes women businesses, because we know that majority of women are involved in the micro businesses, the smallest businesses, and they earn least amount of income. So to address some of the key issues in the economy, that sector needs to be taken into account. Of course, the move in agricultural sector is a brilliant one, because again, agriculture employs many people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, Dr. Gashie, what's your last word on this?
No, I will look at the low-hanging fruit. I will look at the political environment. It's stable for the government. They have majority in both houses. So quickly they need to bring legislation and the operationalization framework for the 50 billion Hazara Fund, so that those small micro enterprises can benefit, and 80% of the informal sector.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I have a viewer saying the government finally needs to make the SGR contract public. If that is what we will be paying in January next year, Kenyans need to know what was agreed upon. And I mean, those are some of the promises that were made by the KWANZA team on the campaign trail, and we will wait for that. But it sounds like all my guests are saying continue fastening your seatbelt if there is room to fasten anything, because still tough times ahead. Some are saying for the next 9 months, others are saying we could see real tangible relief up until 2025. But can we wait that long? We're not yet even in 2023. My goodness. Whatever the case, a fascinating conversation. Thank you to my guests. Here in studio, I've had Dr. Mary Mbidi, a senior lecturer at Department of Economics, UON. Thank you for your time. Dr. Stephen Gashie, who's an economic analyst. Asante sana for joining us today. We still don't know the bet. We'll keep waiting to hear about it. And Mohamed Welie, central banker, a football fan. I think he's missing his favorite team right now, but we'll release him now to go and catch the highlights of that match. Thank you so much to each of you, and thank you for you who's tuned in and sent your feedback. 22422, the SMS line, #Newsnight. We can continue engaging online, but this is where we wrap up. Many thanks to the team that's made this broadcast possible this evening, the big team, must I say, dare I say. And of course, our sign language interpreter tonight has been Joki Shege. On behalf of everyone, thank you for tuning in. My name is Wahiga Mwaura. Goodbye for now. We'll see you soon. Kwaheri.